Hey everybody, so we're going to start the bonding unit, and the bonding unit focuses on bonding of atoms within molecules and molecules to molecules. And so we're going to really focus on that stuff, but to give you a base for the unit moving forward, there's two basic types of bonds that are kind of the most talked about types of bonds in chemistry, and it's an ionic bond and a covalent bond. Now, ionic bonds are simply just bonds that are found inside of ionic compounds. And we've discussed this in previous courses, and we've discussed this in this course as we reviewed some content. But again, just to kind of recap, an ionic bond is between at least two ions within a compound. And the way that those ions are formed those ions are formed is where we have a transfer of electrons from one particular atom in a compound to another particular atom in a compound, therefore forming ions. And so the example that I like to give with this really basic example of sodium chloride, we know that sodium chloride is an ionic compound, and we know that sodium chloride is ionic because it's made from ions. But the way that those ions come to be is that the sodium ion gives its electron or an electron to the chloride ion. And this is what makes sodium positive. It's positive because it has one less electron than its elemental form. And the chloride ion is negative because it's got one more electron than its elemental form. And so what's really happened here is the sodium ion has given an electron to the chloride ion, therefore forming ions in both of those substances. And now the positive nature of the sodium ion is attracted to the negative nature of the chloride ion, because we know that opposite charges attract. And so this little attraction right here, that is what we would consider to be our ionic bond. Now, ionic compounds, like sodium chloride, will form what we call crystal lattices. And so you can see here in this diagram that we've got a positive charge here, but it's not just attracted to one other negative charge or negative ion. It is surrounded by negative ions, and negative ions are surrounded by positive ions. And so they form what we call crystal lattices, and we call them crystal lattices because they form this lattice network. And if you've ever seen sort of decorative lattice work on maybe the tops of fences or underneath decks, it's sort of this diamond pattern that overlaps. And so I've tried to kind of draw that so you can kind of see sort of that lattice work within this crystal structure. But this is just this alternating pattern of positives and negatives, where all the positives are attracted to all the negatives and all the negatives are attracted to the positives, and they form this sort of layered crystal lattice work here that looks kind of like that. And that's a pretty basic example of a crystal lattice. The other type of bond that you need to know for this unit, and of which we're going to spend the rest of our time learning about, are covalent bonds. And so ionic bonds, that's it. That's all you got to know. And for covalent bonds, we're going to spend an extensive amount of time talking about them and how covalent bonds are used or exist in other types of molecules, specifically molecular compounds that we've learned about in previous courses. And so a covalent bond, very simply by definition, means that electrons are not being transferred or stolen, but they're being shared between two entities. And that sharing of electrons can exist in lots of different ways, and we'll get into more details of what that looks like and how we can draw diagrams to illustrate that and show that. But these two types of bonds here, ionic bonds and covalent bonds, you'll notice, are bonds that occur within molecules. And anytime we have a bond that occurs within a molecule, an ionic bond or a covalent bond, we refer to those as intramolecular bonds. And the term intra means within. And so an intramolecular bond is just a bond that occurs within a molecule. So an ionic bond and a covalent bond are two types of intramolecular bonds. So stick with me here. We're going to see if we can't learn something about these covalent bonds, and we'll be right back with our next clip. Thanks for watching.